Okay, so this is Gaspard de Coligny. Coligny lived from 1519 to 1572, and by 1552 he's a French admiral, and he's very successful, so he's very well known in France because he's a very successful military general. And somewhere between 1552 and 1558, he's led to Christ by his brother. And Calvin, he has the connection that Calvin actually writes letters back and forth to Coligny. And the first letter that he writes to him is in September of 1558. And so once he comes to Reformed faith, he's a very powerful person, right? He's an admiral in France. He's a very powerful person politically in France. And so what he does, but he's secret, he doesn't come out and openly state that he's a Huguenot. But what he does is he tries to establish colonies in Rio de Janeiro, in Florida, and other places. The persecution's happening in France of the Huguenots, so he's trying to arrange colonies for them to flee to. None of that really works out. And then Henry II dies. And when Henry II dies, Coligny comes out and openly states that he's a Huguenot. And he becomes the head of the Huguenot party, because when they die, there's usually debates as to who becomes the next king. And so he publicly comes out as a Huguenot and becomes the leader of the Huguenot party. And the position of the Huguenot party was religious toleration. You have to be able to tolerate any kinds of religion. They refuse, civil war breaks out, and so by 1562, there's a civil war in France, very much between the Roman Catholics and the Huguenots. All the other military leaders die that are Huguenots, so Coligny ends up being the head of the army of the Reformed in France. And they have some successes, they have some failures, but at the end, by 1570, they sign a peace treaty, the Peace Treaty of Saint-Germain. And the Peace Treaty of Saint-Germain promises that they will not persecute and they will not kill Christians anymore. So it gives them religious toleration. They also have 4 cities, La Rochelle, Cognac, Montauban, and Le Charest, are all given to the Huguenots. So those are Huguenot cities. So now, instead of having to flee to Rio de Janeiro, they can actually, there's cities in France that they can move to. And another term is Catherine de' Medici, who's mother of the king. She's going to give her daughter to Henry of Navarre. Henry of Navarre is a pretty well-known Protestant at that time. He ends up renouncing the faith and going back to Roman Catholicism later. But this is in Europe, when you have 2 nations and you want to have them come to peace, what you do is you have one son marry one daughter and then they come to peace. And so part of this peace treaty is that Margaret de Valois will marry Henry of Navarre. So that marriage takes place 2 years later. And so everybody comes to Paris for this great wedding, right, and this great celebration. And during this, and Coligny's there, and during this celebration, 3 days in, they end up trying to assassinate Coligny, and that assassination attempt fails. But 2 days later is St. Bartholomew Day's Eve. And on St. Bartholomew's Day, they end up killing about 5,000 to 30,000 Huguenots throughout all of France. And the first one to die is Coligny, or not the first one, but he's the main target because he's the leader of the Huguenots. So this ends up driving the Huguenots out of France, and France becomes very much unreformed from that point forward. So it ends up that he's killed 5 days after the wedding between Marguerite and Henry. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and share it with your friends. You can also visit www.discerninghistory.com for more videos and other resources.